Good morning, everybody. I am glad you guys are all here today. Today, we're actually doing a little bit of a different seminar, which is kind of exciting. I just wanted to share with you where this seminar came about. Myself and Neve Quinn, the vertebrate interactions advisor down in Orange County, we received a small grant from UC A&R Renewable Resources Extension Act. And with that, we will be bringing more seminars like this on how to coexist with wildlife. I've had several farm calls and just people sharing their stories about having to live now with like bears and mountain lions, and coyote numbers are going up, and we just thought it would be really neat to bring something like this to you guys to share, because of the fires and the droughts and everything that's happening. They're starting to encroach and where not so much where the homes are at because of the coyotes, but now they're coming into where like the growers are at. So we thought this would be a really unique seminar that we can bring to you guys. And this is worth 1 DPR unit. And I'm going to list some of our sponsors. We have our foundation sponsors, which we would really like to thank. They've been concrete and been sponsoring these seminars that we've been having. And we have the American Ag Credit, Brocon Nursery, Calavo, Del Rey Avocado Company, Farm Credit West, Index Fresh, Mission Produce, Nutrien, Westphalia Fruit, and Westpac. We also have webinar sponsors who have helped us during these COVID times, sponsor these webinars. Yamara, AGQ Labs, and San Agro. So thank you so much to our sponsors for making this possible. And I just wanted, again, to thank you for being here. And we are going to jump into our first speaker. Our first speaker is Rebecca Barboza. And okay, let me get your title correct because they recently changed it. It's no longer Fish and Game, right?
Right. Yeah, we're the Department of Fish and Wildlife now.
Department of Fish and Wildlife, yes. And she will be speaking on mountain lions, and she'll be talking more about their biology and how we can coexist with them. Maybe they're not so scary, hopefully, as much as we think they are. But I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share your screen, Rebecca.
Okay.
Let's see if I stop share.
There we go. Well, thank you, Sonia, for having me here. I'm so glad to see that there's so many people that are interested in this seminar. The more people that we address, the more our message gets out. So this is a really great opportunity for me, as well as for hopefully the audience, to learn a little bit about living with mountain lions. So my name again is Rebecca Barboza. I'm the wildlife biologist for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm also the regional human wildlife conflict coordinator. So my area spans from Santa Barbara all the way down to San Diego. And today I'll be talking a little bit about mountain lion. So just some general facts. So what is this animal? You hear mountain lion, you hear cougar, you hear puma. There's in fact over 40 common names in English for the mountain lion. And it's part of that reason for all those names is that they are so widespread throughout North America that the different regions have different common names for them. My preference is mountain lion. I've tried saying cougar and puma, but it just doesn't fit my vernacular. So I just use mountain lion. But yeah, puma concolor. Their color is a tawny beige, and the name concolor refers to one color. So they have one color as opposed to like a tiger that has stripes. They do have a black tipped tail. That tail is very long. It's 40% of their total body length. And they have a characteristic mustache on their face. Mountain lions cannot roar. They can make screaming sounds. They're also the largest cat that purrs. Mountain lion kittens are spotted. They have dark rings around the tail and their markings fade as they mature. Adult mountain lions are 7 to 8 feet long. Males weigh about 100 to 150 pounds. Females around 65 to 90 pounds. Seeing a mountain lion makes them sometimes look a lot bigger in our minds. So when I hear that someone's seen a 200-pound mountain lion, I know that that's kind of an over-exaggeration, because most of the time they're about 100 pounds. Their average maximum lifespan is about 12 years in the wild, but most of the time they don't live to that maximum. They get in fights with other cats, and vehicle strikes are really the most common cause of mortality in most of our locations. They can jump vertically 18 feet, and they can jump out horizontally 20 to 30 feet. So if you're thinking that fencing around your property can keep the cats out, really you have to have an extensive fencing system. Even the San Diego Zoo Safari Park has very tall fencing with the top fence toppers angled out like we described, and they have electrical fencing, and still the mountain lions get into their property. So it's very hard to keep most wildlife out of your property. Mountain lions are polygamous, meaning they have multiple partners. They can breed year round. The female's first litter is at about 2 to 3 years old, and they breed about every 2 years. During that 2-year time span, the kitten stays with the female, where she's teaching them how to hunt and social behaviors. I wanted to go over some tracks, because we get a lot of questions about what is this animal that's left a track on my property. So for mountain lions, well, what I look for first is I look for claw marks. In this dog print, you can see either the little triangular or the little dash up above each toe impression. And with a mountain lion, you don't see any claw marks because their claws are retractable. The second thing that I look at is the heel pad that has a characteristic M shape, and you can see it better on the actual print, on the actual foot here. Dogs have more of a triangular look to their heel pad. And then this mound of dirt that the print leaves in a dog print there's no mound up here in the cat's print. So and also mountain lion tracks, depending on the age of the animal, are generally take up a little more space than a dog's track. There's lots of different other tips that I give to people when they're trying to determine a track, but those are the main ones. Mountain lion habitat covers over half of the state of California, and it coincides with mule deer range because that's their primary prey item. So wherever you see mule deer, you'll find mountain lions. They prefer forests, riparian areas, and deserts, and we're seeing them more and more in the urban wildland interface. Mountain lions' home range are very large. They average 100 to 200 square miles, and they are solitary as adults. So we don't see prides of mountain lions hanging around. Mountain lion status in California, they are a specially protected mammal. They're the only animal in North America that has this designation. And as a matter of fact, this designation was created specifically for mountain lions. Fish and Game Code section 4800 states that it's unlawful to take, injure, possess, transport, import, or sell a mountain lion or a product of a mountain lion. There are exceptions. Occasionally we do issue possession permits, like for pelts or mounts for educational purposes, or scientific studies. If someone wants to radio collar a mountain lion, we have an agreement with that entity to be able to take a mountain lion in that way. There's also take allowed under a depredation permit that a resident can get. And the definition of take is to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, kill, or attempt to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, or kill. So those are the exceptions. So a specially protected mammal is the first status, and the second status is that they are protected under the California Endangered Species Act. In 2020, there was a petition that was requesting the department and the Fish and Game Commission to list mountain lions as threatened under the California Endangered Species Act, or CISA. And while the department and the commission are reviewing the petition, mountain lions get all of the protections under CISA. So they're currently designated as a candidate species under CISA. So the status in California is specially protected mammal and candidate species under CISA. Mountain lions are generally calm, quiet, and elusive. You probably will never even see a mountain lion in your lifetime. They're most commonly found in areas with plentiful prey and adequate cover, and they usually hunt alone and at night. And again, they primarily prey on mule deer. They can opportunistically take unprotected pets and livestock, but they can't make a living this way. They really need that large game to make a living. Why are mountain lions important? Well, they're known as a keystone species. And basically, if mountain lions as a species were removed from the system, that system would change drastically. Mountain lions regulate prey species, particularly deer, and their cache kills provide a food source for smaller predators. So they really do provide a service to the ecosystem. They're also known as an umbrella species because they have large habitat requirements. They have large home range sizes. When we do conservation of mountain lion habitat, we're actually conserving numerous other species. They're also highly charismatic animals. There's a lot of public support for their conservation, so for conservation of mountain lions and their habitat. And as an example of that, we have the Liberty Canyon highway overcrossing, which is going to be built soon. And it's the largest and most complex crossing in the world at this point that we're looking forward to. Common challenges for the mountain lion. Like other wildlife species, there's a loss of habitat fragmentation, and the corresponding lack of a loss of genetic diversity that comes from that. Mountain lions in some areas of the state are seeing loss of prey. So the deer population in some areas of the state are unstable or declining. In other areas of the state, like Southern California, where we have a lot of bears, there's a lot of competition with bears, so that the mountain lion will make a kill and cache it, the bear will find it and take it, and so the mountain lion will have to make another kill because they don't want to expend the energy fighting the bear for another kill. So loss of prey is a big item as one of the challenges for mountain lions. There's also challenges in disease and rodenticide poisonings for mountain lions as a species, and human wildlife conflicts impact mountain lions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our relocation policy. And in general, relocation is not used to resolve human wildlife conflicts. The reason for that is that it moves a so-called problem elsewhere. So if we move a problem mountain lion, it's going to end up somewhere else where it's going to be causing a problem. And wildlife return to their home range, particularly mountain lions. We could move them hundreds of miles away, and they have an incredible homing adaptation that gets them back to their home range. So when we try and move them out of their home range, suddenly they don't know where their resources are. So they're going to turn around and come right back. Also, if a mountain lion can't make it back to its home range, another one will take its place because space is at a premium, particularly in Southern California. Relocation spreads disease, and in general, there's low survival rates when we try to relocate wildlife. They have a lot of competition if we put them into a new location. They can starve to death because they're not equipped to find their forage items. And then, as I mentioned before, vehicle strikes are a very common cause of mortality, particularly when a mountain lion is coming back to its home range, because they're going to use the the easiest path available to them, which is usually the road system. So identifying mountain lion kills can be kind of tricky because they tend to cache their prey. Here you just see a pile of leaves, but if you look over here in this corner, you'll see a muzzle. So this is a goat that's been cached by a mountain lion, and they will cover mountain lion, or they will cover their prey with leaves, grasses, and branches. And this is to hide it from scavengers. It also keeps the temperature down, so it's better than keeping it in the sunlight, so it keeps them fresher longer. The mountain lion will come back and feed on the carcass for several days or up to a week, depending on the size of the kill. And this is what we see a lot of in enclosure situations. You see this almost surgical precision that this mountain lion has cut open this goat. And the mountain lion will begin immediately feeding on the organs. And once they're done with the organs, they'll kind of carefully move the rumen, the stomach contents out of the way. They don't want to open that up because it's pretty smelly. After they eat the organs, then they'll go into the muscle tissue. And it's a lot different than, say, a coyote kill. Coyotes kind of bite all over the place and they work in packs, and they kind of have messier kills than a mountain lion kill. So how do I prevent mountain lion conflicts? The first and most important probably for a lot of areas is to create enclosures for pets and livestock. So we want to have walls and a roof, and we want to seal openings that are larger than 4 inches. That seems pretty small, but mountain lions can take advantage of any weakness in the design and enter into that corral. We want to reinforce and replace walls with 11 gauge chain link or equivalent. We want to make sure that doors are sturdy and they're able to be locked and closed securely. And again, we want to have a roof that must be strong enough to support the weight of a mountain lion. And the second most important thing is deterrence. So we want to remove any carcasses, remove any attractants that might bring the mountain lion onto your property. A lot of ranchers will use electrical fencing, particularly in areas where they can't keep livestock enclosed. Livestock guard animals have been used for millennia and they work, so it's something that we recommend. Human presence also. Mountain lions tend to avoid areas where there's a lot of human presence. And multi-species grazing, so keeping goats with cattle. A lot of times mountain lions will not attack cattle, so keeping the goats, which would be the target species, along with cattle can protect them. And deterrent methods provide a short-term fix as compared to exclusion methods. So it's important to use enclosures as well as deterrent methods in combination for the best results. So if there's damage to property, that's called depredation, a property owner can request a depredation permit from the department. And the first thing that happens is we conduct an investigation. By law, we must find evidence that a mountain lion caused the damage and not some other animal. So we're looking for tracks, drag marks, we inspect the carcass, and we discuss with the reporting party any current preventative measures that they're taking. If we do find evidence that it was a mountain lion that caused the damage, the law says that we shall issue a permit. So the first permit that we issue is a non-lethal hazing permit. And we provide ideas for different lights and noise deterrents that can scare the mountain lion away. And a lot of people will question that and say, well, I really need a permit to put lights on my property or to use noise to scare this animal away. And the answer to that is yes, because of that extended definition of take. Our attorneys have discovered that this type of hazing is considered take. And because they are such a highly protected species, we need to write a permit for hazing. So those permits are good for 10 days, for a 10-day period. So if the mountain lion comes back within that 10-day period and the property owner has done everything that we've recommended, there's still damage, we can issue a second permit, which is again a non-lethal hazing permit for more intensive hazing techniques. And again, if the mountain lion comes back, the person has done everything that we've recommended, causes more damage, then the third permit we would issue is a lethal permit. So public safety incidents, there's a lot of confusion between, well, what is a public safety incident? And there's a difference between perceived versus confirmed public safety incidents. For instance, in 2018, statewide, we received 807 mountain lion calls, and only one was deemed a public safety incident by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So there's a lot of people that believe that, you know, the mere presence of a mountain lion is a threat to public safety. And the good news is that none of our predatory species in California prey upon humans. They're not physiologically wired to target us. So basically, you know, a public safety incident would be something like, you know, a mountain lion is confronting a human, their ears are back, they're growling, they're gnashing their teeth, they're swishing their tail, they're about to pounce, you know, that kind of thing. So basically law enforcement will make the call. So if we get a call that there's an aggressive mountain lion, law enforcement will go out there and they will determine whether or not that animal is actually a public safety threat. So that would be one of our wildlife officers, sheriff or police department, park ranger or Forest Service law enforcement, or any law enforcement entity can come on scene and deem that animal a public safety and immediately take lethal action if necessary. So the mere presence, again, of wildlife does not necessarily pose an imminent threat to public safety. Imminent threat means that someone will be injured or killed, and the only way to prevent that is to immediately kill that animal. Generally, with space and time, the animal will leave on its own, which is what we want. So what do you do if you encounter a mountain lion? First of all, you do not turn and run. That can cause, that can trigger a chase instinct in the animal and it will follow you. Try to appear larger than the mountain lion. Pick up small children and place them on your shoulders. Face the mountain lion, talk to it in a low, firm voice and slowly back away. And always give that mountain lion plenty of room to leave the area as soon as possible. So if you want more information about living with wildlife or mountain lions, you can go to our website. And that's pretty easy to find if you just go on Google or any search engine, just California living with wildlife. And one of the first results there will be our website. So with that, that concludes my presentation. And I don't know if we're taking questions right now or if we're going on to the next one, but that concludes my presentation.
Yes, we can go ahead and take questions for Rebecca. Thank you so much for that talk. I actually learned a lot.
Good.
Okay, 6. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca regarding mountain lions? Potential. Let's see in the chat. Let's see if Ben got anything.
Yeah, there are no questions. I have a question. So what about all these, you know, reports about people being stalked and chased, and this is all just media frenzy?
Well, you know, you immediately made me remember this one YouTube video that I saw of a guy that was hiking and he came across some mountain lion cubs and he was starting to leave the area and the female came up and basically followed him as he made a hasty retreat. And a lot of people were saying, well, the female was stalking him. Well, she wasn't really stalking him at all. She was making sure that that human was leaving the area because she felt that it was a threat to her kittens. If that mountain lion really wanted to attack that person, he would have been attacked. So they, you know, and I saw her disposition. She was, you know, she was not showing any aggression at all. She was just saying, hey, you know, get out of my area. But, you know, from the hiker's perspective, it's really easy to see how he would perceive himself as being stalked by that mountain lion.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered your question.
And I actually have a question. So a while back when I was a student, I worked for the Forest Service, and we went up to the high Sierras a lot, like high Sierras. And we've heard of people saying that they had sightings of mountain lions. but I never ran across one, thank goodness. But I was told that if you wore your sunglasses backwards, that's an intimidating thing for them, because it would be as if you're watching them, which means they can't technically what's the word, stalk you, I guess you could say, because you know that they're watching you or something like that. Is there any truth to that?
I haven't heard that technique with mountain lions, but it works with birds of prey that are swooping down because they're protecting the nest. But I haven't heard that with mountain lions, but I can see how, you know, it might work if you're walking away from it and turn your hat backwards so it thinks you're still looking at it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Here's a question. Do mountain lions avoid areas with bears?
Well, they utilize the same areas. And I know for a fact in the San Gabriel Mountains, we have situations like I described where the mountain lion will make a kill and the bear will be in the area and he'll take over that kill. We've had one known incident where the mountain lion and the bear fought over the carcass and the mountain lion lost. So they don't necessarily avoid the area that bears use, but they will tend to try and avoid encountering each other.
Okay. And then I have like a scenario type of deal. Okay, let's say you have pickers out there and they're all picking, doing their job like they always do. And one of them spots a mountain lion. When he spots it, his first reaction would be like, oh, I think I see a mountain lion. And like, what would you suggest they would do in that situation? Like the pickers, that would you suggest, you know, just telling your pickers that if you do come across one, don't start running and screaming, saying that there's a mountain lion? Or do you, you know, tell the foreman quietly and just have people leave the area? Or how would you go about that?
Yeah, I would probably, you know, if it's possible to group together so that they, you know, there's safety in numbers. They're not going to, there's been no known attacks by a mountain lion on a group of people. All of our so-called attacks are on a single person. So to group together and then slowly leave the area would be the best approach.
And then would they leave the area like all day, or just like, how would they go about that? Because isn't that where they usually lounge, or are they just happen to be there that day?
Yeah, it would probably be good to have some sort of, and you could use this for coyotes, for bears, for anything, but to have some sort of kit put together, like with air horns. So people grab air horns really quick and shoot off the air horns, loud noises to scare that animal away. That would be a really good protocol to have.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you.
Questions? Do they sleep in trees? Do they have a burrow? Do they have are the kittens in a den? Do they hide them in trees? And do they graze? Do they eat lizards? Grass?
Yeah, no, they don't eat grass. They're strict carnivores. They will go into trees. They do like to be, they like to view, just like domestic house cats, they find the highest spot in your house because they like to get an overall view of the area. So they do like trees, but they'll rest almost anywhere. You know, they don't have to be in a tree to rest. What other questions were you? Oh yeah,
where do they hide the
animals besides? Yeah, they don't really, you know, they don't really den up like a bear would. They'll hide, the kittens will hide in a shrubby area, something like that, or in the trees, as you saw from the one picture of the kitten in the tree in my presentation. And they will eat smaller prey. They will eat coyotes, raccoons, skunks. But as with domestic pets, they can't make a living that way. They really need that mule deer.
And what does scat look like? What does the mountain lion scat look like?
Yeah, well, there'll be a large deposit and it will be primarily hair. A lot of people will send me pictures and they're either bear scats or coyote scats, and you can see actual seeds and berries and other things that mountain lions don't eat. So mountain lion scats will have a lot of hair in them.
One of our naturalist growers says that they eat avocados in Carpinteria.
Really? Well, that wouldn't be a common food choice, but avocados are tasty, and I can see why they might eat them too. They have a lot of fat in them too. So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. I think that ends it. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. That was
Sure.
that was really fun to do something a little bit different. Somebody has a question? Or was
I think that was me.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. What we're gonna do really quick is we're gonna put up your quiz. Sausen's gonna put up your quiz really quick, and we need this for DPR. If you guys can please do the best that you can for that. It is in the chat box. And as you guys are doing that quiz, we're gonna get Jim Hartman tucked away here for because he's our next speaker. Okay, we'll give you guys a few moments for that. Okay.
Well, that's a hard quiz.
I'm sorry. I probably should have made it easier.
Okay, we'll give you guys a few more minutes because Ben says it's hard.
To your question about reversing your glasses and what have you with cats, I know in India with tigers, where the last guy that walks through the woods gets attacked, that there is some research to show they actually wear a mask backwards on their head, and they've shown that actually does seem to have an issue with, because tigers don't want to attack you when you're looking at them.
Right.
But it actually shows some promise, at least on tigers.
That's awesome. Even I learned something today.
That's the fun about biology. There's always something, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we'll give it one more minute. How are you doing with that quiz, Ben?
Oh, I answered it a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I guess. Okay, then we'll go ahead and move on. Our next speaker is from the Los Angeles Ag Commissioner's Office, I believe. It was a little bit of a last minute switch, but from what Neve Quinn was saying, that we got an upgrade when it comes to pocket gophers and ground squirrel information. We have Jim Hartman. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more, how long have you been doing this? What's your current position?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jim Hartman. I'm with the Los Angeles County Agriculture Commissioner Weights and Measures Department. I'm the Deputy Agriculture Commissioner and Sealer for the Integrated Pest Management Division. I've been here for 36 years, right after the earth cooled after the last ice age. I've been here. So I have 40 people that I supervise. I deal with everything from vertebrate pest management. Now, I only deal with things like, meadow mice, the coyotes, lions, tigers, and bears. That's all Rebecca's background. I also do vegetation management. I also deal with red imported fire ant, plague suppression, basically anything that another county agency or needs to be dealt with, I deal with. And so we have a lot of very interesting encounters ourselves, certainly with coyotes. But I'm going to talk a little bit about today about our program with or about pocket gophers and ground squirrels, which really for us is our bread and butter, because we do this kind of work ourselves, and we do a lot of this kind of stuff for our other public agencies. So we get a lot of practice at this. This really angry gopher, I'd like to thank Ed Williams, for the commissioner of Ventura County, for ag, for letting us borrow this, because it's perfect. For obviously he's not happy. So pocket gophers are called that because of the two fur-lined pouches on either side of their cheeks. They use these to carry food and other things, and they also stuff them with as they move through their burrows and they do burrowing. They also use their teeth when they burrow, so they readily use these pockets. They also will stuff these with, I've even found them when I used to do work at the Cal Poly farm, they would windrow barley for drying and before turning it into hay. I could hear them underneath the windrows gathering the seed heads and taking it down into their burrows as well, and they were stuffing them in their cheek pouches. There are 6 species of pocket gophers in the West. Ours is the Valley or Boda pocket gopher, Tamami's BTY, if you want to know the scientific name. They live almost completely underground, so they're referred to as fossorial rodents. They will leave the burrow system sometimes to find new areas. They will at night come up sometimes and literally graze around their burrow systems, although they're not usually found very far from them. They like their own company. In fact, they will fight and expel any intruders to their tunnels, and including their young. After a certain period of time, they literally will kick them out. The females only tolerate males long enough for them to procreate, and again, they're kicked out as well. The average burrow system can go anywhere from 200 to 2,000 square feet, depending on the resources available to them. And they're pretty strictly vegetarian. They eat mostly underground parts of plants, roots and things like that. And in Southern California here, they breed year round. So there's no shortage of gophers. You can have up to 62 gophers per acre in some areas, perhaps even more. Certainly in alfalfa fields that are in their 6th or 7th year, you can have tremendous amounts of carrying capacity there. Usually about 16 to 20 per acre is the most common. Pocket gophers will readily invade other tunnels that they find and will incorporate them into their burrow system. So, that's one reason why they can maintain such a large burrow system. Also, gophers will go through their entire burrow system at least once every 24 hours, which is good for us if we're trying to do control work. So why would we want to manage gophers? Well, of course, mounds are a tripping hazard, particularly in urban areas where you have parks and golf courses, things like that. They love to chew drip irrigation lines. They cause a lot of soil erosion on hillsides and on slopes and on engineered structures like flood control channels. They also provide a foothold for weeds because, you have a nice alfalfa field or a nice field out there that they put all this wonderful soil on top of. Well, nature abhors a vacuum. So it gives a really nice opportunity for all kinds of weed seeds to find a purchase and get started. And in fact, one of the reasons why we generally don't cut more than about 7 years off of an alfalfa field is because the weeds have gotten to be so prolific that the value for the hay is it's limited and allows other issues with it. Of course, they damage lawn maintenance and farm equipment, provide habitat for secondary pests. Meadow mice love to use old gopher burrows and systems for their purposes, and you'll see them. Quite frankly, you can go right along where even though you've gotten the control, you can see where they've opened up and have these open holes where they are living quite happily communally. Their extensive mounds can also smother crops and turf. Literally, they don't get the sunlight that they need, so they won't develop properly. They damage the integrity of engineered water control structures, so flood control structures or water conveyance systems. Like I say, they say one of the things is that gopher and ground squirrel activity cause up to 70% of the slope failures in California. So the damage, as you all seen, whether they eat your crops, damage in a vineyard, they'll girdle trees. Certainly, they'll also, like I say, where water finds a way to get down into the hole, they'll cause erosion issues for us. They can make about 1 to 3 mounds per day, and they dig almost 1 3/4 inches per minute. So they can motivate when they want to. And of course, you have these typical crescent C-shaped burrow systems, which helps differentiate them from a mole mound. And then you also have these small little pop-ups, and you can see in the one of these one image there, where you can see where they've actually grazed around it, because they'll come up at night and they will graze around the holes when they have the opportunity. So a burrow system, they have lateral feeding tunnels ending in a mound. So they push dirt up, and why it's a C shape is that they're coming up at a 45-degree angle, and they're pushing it up and around the hole. So that's why it's always kind of in that C shape. So if you're looking for the main run for a gopher system, it's always behind that C and right behind it there. So if you're looking to find for, use for a trapping or for toxicants, that's where you're going to find the main run. Burrow is down 4 to 18 inches. They'll go deeper. The maximum is about 5 to 6 feet. That's where they like to hang out when it gets warmer. But like I say, the extensive burrow system is, and that's one reason why, if folks try to put a hose down, like we all tried as in our lawns, there's way too many ways for them to get out of the way. So it's really a waste of time and water to try just to put a hose down in the burrow system to get rid of them. There's a number of different management methods, techniques. I certainly seen our friend here, the blue heron, help us out in our county parks. They love these things. But habitat modification, exclusion, trapping, rodenticides, and fumigants, and there's some other methods as well. Habitat modification, if you have the opportunity to, and you're in an agricultural situation, deep disking and ripping works really well for that. Flooding, if you can put a lot of water on in a very short period of time, also works really well. However, that's generally not an option here. I mean, given the fact that, deep disking isn't an option for things like orchards and other things. And of course, water in California, we need it for other things other than for gopher control. But it will work if you can get it on fast enough and hold it for long enough. In fact, my senior project, that was one of the things we did to clear the field. I did a paper on the inhibitory effects of sweet Sudan grass on gopher activity, and needed to clean the field out. And the way we prepared the field was by flooding. Exclusion. Now these methods can work, but they're of limited value, because obviously you're not going to be able to put along a major agricultural field wire mesh, 3 feet down, all the way around the outside. And depending on soil moisture and chemistry, it only lasts about 5 years or so. But in places where you have like raised beds, or around, and you're doing restoration projects with oaks or things like that, that you want to keep the gophers away for 3 to 5 years, this is a way to help that program and help to get the roots established and keep gophers out. However, no matter how much of the stuff that you put out there, the hardware cloth, eventually it breaks down and gophers will punch their way through. But this is something that can be used in small areas. At UC Davis, they found that if you only put hardware cloth down 2 feet, it just wasn't enough to keep gophers out. You have to go at least 36 inches and put at least 12 inches above ground to keep them from migrating across and negating your barrier. Trapping can be used. I use this photo because it's this illustration because it's helpful. Of course, it doesn't make any sense to have lettuce or what have you. There's not an attractant and they've done a lot of research to show that there are no attractants for trapping. But you do want to, if you are going to trap, you do want to have them staked down, so that way your $8, $10, $12 traps don't go walking off on you, because gophers will take them down with them when they are trapped. There are a number of different traps that are out there. Research from UC Davis has shown that all of these traps can be effective. The cinch trap here on the far right is the most effective that they found. They also found that the gophinator was superior to the Maccabee, particularly because of larger sized gophers. And although it's a little tricky to set, it can be very effectively used. It's a very good option for homeowners. It might be too labor intensive for acreages more than 5 acres. However, more recent research done by UC Davis has shown that well-trained personnel can make a huge difference in that. So you can, it is a viable option for larger agricultural concerns if you have a really good, well-trained staff. If they found in their study that the better trained the technician was, the more effective and the more efficient that they were. So it's if you're going to use this method, which again has a lot of value to it, you do need to put the time in to have your guys trained and make sure that they have the discipline to get out there and be the efficient people we need them to be. Another option that's relatively new is the gopher hawk trap. This one is a little easier to set. Doesn't take as much effort. Basically, they have a special tool where you find the burrow system, you find the main run, you press down the tube, and if the gopher goes through there and hits the trigger, it catches it. And the nice thing about it is there's a yellow portion to the upper portion, so it's almost like a flag. So you immediately know that you have a catch. The downside is it tends to be better for the smaller gophers. Larger gophers don't seem to be as effective. It's also relatively expensive, and because it does have an attractiveness to it, we've used them, and they sometimes will, let's say, walk off on us. So there's a number of rodenticides that are still available for gophers. Strychnine, which is a restricted use material, zinc phosphide, and diphacinone. Strychnine, it's an acute toxicant. It's great for controlling gophers, given its acute toxicity. It's more palatable, it has a more palatable flavor than zinc. If they'll eat it, it's incredibly effective. There is some behavioral resistance to using strychnine. So if you use it over and over and over again, gophers simply learn to avoid it. And why I talk about how effective it is, it's very effective if they eat it, because again, sometimes it can take up to 2 weeks for them to find it in the burrow system. It's about 60-70% effective in that. They only eat it about that often. If they were to eat it, it's 100% effective, because it's absolutely devastating and lethal to them. Also, too, there's little worry of secondary poisoning with it. Zinc phosphide is another acute toxicant. It also is very, very effective if they'll eat it. Again, gophers can develop bait shyness. This particular material has a very, very bitter flavor to it. So it's something that they will eventually learn to avoid. But again, if they will eat it, it's 100% effective. But again, remember, all these baits are things that gophers don't generally occur in nature. So therefore, it's not in their nature to be fed grain or any kind of extruded pellet. So when they find it, they may or may not eat it, or they may not recognize it as food. There are some anticoagulant rodenticides that can be used for gopher work, diphacinone and chlorphacinone. These are first generation anticoagulants. They require multiple feeding. And again, they can be used if someone is worried about primary toxicity from both zinc or strychnine. There are sometimes a risk of secondary toxicosis, although this has a much shorter half-life than the second generation anticoagulants. So it's a much reduced risk but the biggest problem with these materials is that they have to be fed on several times. And we've used them, and although, like I say, they can be effective in some areas, we generally don't use these because they just aren't as effective as we need them to be. But they are an option. There are a number of different application methods that you can use. Certainly, they have the closed system, the Wilco system, where they apply the bait directly into a burrow system. You also have the burrow builder, which is used with strychnine. The Wilco is also a strychnine applicator. You can also do it by hand as well. All of these work, but they all have a certain amount of applicability to your situation. So not all of these will work in the best of circumstances. There are some fumigants out there, aluminumphosphide. Although it's not technically a fumigant in the same way that aluminum phosphide is, you do have carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and propane, which is not a pesticide, but it's an explosive. Aluminum phosphide, when exposed to air, generates hydrogen phosphide gas or phosphine. It's odorless, although it can flash if you are opening a container that has already been opened. So you need to be careful about how you use it. It decomposes after it volatilizes and doesn't create any secondary poisoning. And it's 99% effective. Where it can be used, it is really, really a good material. Of course, you have to keep it away from 100 feet from any structure, occupied or occupiable structure, and it's not allowed everywhere. So it's really important that if you use this material, that you very much read and understand the label. It is a restricted use pesticide. So in agricultural situations, you need a restricted materials permit, and you need a written recommendation from a pest control advisor. And the application, no matter what situation you find yourself in, has to be supervised by an on-site qualified applicator. It also requires a fumigation management plan to be written prior to the performance of the work. And depending on soil, it depends on soil moisture for activation. So it's not a good choice in sandy soils or in particularly dry soils, but where you can use it, it is a very effective material. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, these are a little bit newer to the field. Again, they're very effective where they can be used. Carbon monoxide, you have the PERC system, which introduces the gas into the burrow system. There's a number of different applicators out there. There are single applicators, or as you see here, there's the multiple wand applicator. You meter the gas into the burrow system, close it up, and again, it can be a very, very effective tool. Carbon dioxide is the newest material on the market for rodent control, gopher control. It's IGI and Leafitech have the label. Essentially, they sell you the application equipment, and then they sell you a label, and then you find a distributor for carbon dioxide to put the label onto, and there's a arrangement that you arrange for them. And again, you meter out a certain amount of gas into the system, and it can be very, very effective. There's also the propane oxygen materials out there. They used to be called the rodinator. This is another material, another operator here. It uses propane and oxygen metered into the burrow system, and then there's an igniter. And the idea is the concussion of the explosion kills the gopher. Wouldn't recommend this for any kind of a irrigated school site or places where you might have underground plumbing. Also, of all the methods, it's the most likely to injure the applicator. You can imagine it's the detonation, you can get all kinds of flying objects. Even if it doesn't kill the gopher, it's certainly deaf. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to watch any of the videos on these things, but it is incredibly loud. But the idea is that the concussion not only kills the gopher, but it also destroys the burrow system as well. So it is an option if that's something you would choose to look into. There are some alternative methods as well. There are some plants that allegedly have like the gopher purge that's supposed to be repellent. I've seen lots of gopher purge placed in areas where there's lots of gopher activity, so I'm not sure how effective that is. Chemical repellents like castor oil have been used, ultrasonic and electromagnetic devices, smoke bombs, which are of no value for gophers. They smell it well ahead of the time. Again, you can use flooding, which again, you've got to put it on a very high, quick rate, vibrating devices. And I'll talk a little bit later about biocontrol after I talk about ground squirrels, because it's very similar between the two species. Most of these alternative methods that I'm listing here have very little evidence to show that they work or work effectively. Now, having said that, if someone uses these types of methods and they work for them, like for instance, I know that most of the ultrasonic devices, the research just doesn't show that they're very effective at all. But I have folks that use them down at the port and say that it keeps the seagulls from their boats down there. And who am I to tell them that it doesn't work? If it works for them, that's great. But the science just isn't there to say that it's an effective method to invest in. But certainly alternatives are always being developed, and if someone wants to use these as an opportunity to try something a little different, that's certainly okay with me. Remember also, and I'll talk a little bit more about, as we're talking about integrated pest management, that again, you can't control what you can't measure. So you really need to follow up, and you need to look at what's working for you or what isn't, and evaluate what that method is. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through our ground squirrel portion. So this is our good friend, the ground squirrel. We have had a long relationship with ground squirrels in California. Certainly during World War I, after there was a worldwide food shortage, and of course another pandemic in 1918 with 30 million people that weren't there to till the land. We had tried ground squirrel eradication efforts for many, many years here. This is our ground squirrel drive in 1919 up in the Antelope Valley. If you can believe it, I've actually seen the ads for this. They actually were dismissed school children at the time to go out and put out barley, poison barley in the fields, which of course we would never even consider now. These guys are brownish gray fur, although there is certain dimorphism in their colors. They're 9 to 11 inches long with a 5 to 9 inch tail that isn't bushy like a tree squirrel's. They like to live in colonies in burrow systems where they sleep, rest, have their young, and store their food and avoid danger. These guys like to be out during the day. They're a diurnal or daytime species. The only other two species that you might see out there that might be confused with these are the eastern fox squirrel, which is a non-native invasive species, and of course the western gray squirrel, which is a native species that we find in our oak woodlands areas. So these are the only two that are out, but you can see very clearly these have very, very fuzzy tails. The other thing is too, although both squirrel species can climb trees, when frightened, a ground squirrel always goes into a burrow. Even if they're in a tree, they'll run down the tree and they'll run into a burrow. Tree squirrels will always climb up into a tree or a tall structure. They are never found in a burrow system. So it's always pretty clear what species you're dealing with. So again, they're diurnal. They love warm. They're like us. When it's nice and warm, they like to be outside and be out in the sun. About 80% in California will hibernate during the winter, and 40 to 60% will estivate during the summer. Again, Northern California, this is where we see more of the hibernation and estivation. In Southern California, they pretty much are out year-round here. Breeding occurs in the spring, February, March. They have one litter per year, anywhere from 7 to 8 young per litter. And the young emerge late in April and May. So of course, where you want to break your cycle, if you're going to do some sort of control, you want to do that sometime in the late winter before we have litters come out, because that way you help prevent having young that we have to deal with as well. Ground squirrels can live in a wide variety of habits, but they don't like dense woods or thick chaparral or wet areas. So you're not going to find them in marshes or heavy chaparral or dense woods like you would have in like the high Sierra. What they do like are disturbed habitats, grazed rangelands, road or ditch banks, fence rows, around buildings or bordering crops, places where we've already modified the habitat to the point where it favors their ability to go out and graze, because they like to be in areas where they can see danger coming. They often will have, when other number are out feeding, because these guys are a colonial species. They like to go out and watch for danger from one another. And you'll see them actually, if a coyote or a hawk comes by, they will chirp from the sentinels, and they will all run to a burrow to avoid that. So these are the kinds of areas they like to be in. Food preferences: they like green grasses and herbaceous plants. They eat seeds, grains, nuts. They do like eggs. In fact, one study by Fish and Wildlife back in the 1930s had as much as 80% mortality of quail eggs due to ground squirrel depredation. So this is typical damage that you're going to see from ground squirrels and on crops. They love strawberries. They like your spinach. They'll come up and they'll girdle trees during the winter. Certainly they'll take the nuts right off of a almond tree. They love avocados, as we all do, because it is one of nature's most perfect foods. Again, ground squirrels love to chew on irrigation lines. In fact, one of the first times you may experience this is when you try to irrigate and you see where the water isn't going, or where the trees are starting to dry up, because obviously the water's not getting there, and you'll see breaks in this. In general, though, you can tell this damage different from coyote damage, because coyotes apparently also like our spaghetti out there. You'll see the striations of the teeth marks on the plastic itself, rather than the chewing of a coyote. Also, ground squirrel mounds make it difficult to mow and can create hazards for machinery and pedestrians and livestock. Obviously, animals can step into the holes. They do much more extensive burrowing than even pocket gophers. So again, a mowing piece of equipment can come across there, and it causes a lot of damage. Or you can get a spark, which might start a wildfire if you're in an area where you have flashy fuels around. Ground squirrel burrows caused this break in one of our engineered flood control structures. So it is really it's a leading cause of earthen structure failures is gopher ground squirrel activity and invasive weeds that have tap roots. So there are other implications due to ground squirrel activity. Also, with ground squirrels, you have to be concerned about diseases. Here we're doing flea suppression for bubonic plague up in the Angeles National Forest. We've done that for almost 100 years now. Remember that anytime that you're dealing with rodents, you have to be concerned about zoonoses, and those are diseases that can be transmitted to man by vertebrate animals. It's probably never a good idea to handle any dead rodent. And remember that also too, that folks that have dealt with gophers have been bitten while setting traps. If you're putting that Maccabee or gophinator in the hole and you've dug up that burrow system, they can, again, gophers will defend their burrows very adroitly and actively, and they will bite you. So it's always a good idea to be cognizant of where your fingers and toes are when you're dealing with them. Plague has been around since the Justinian's plague back in, I think, the third century AD. It came to California from Hawaii in 1899. The first transmission that we know of was in 1900 in San Francisco. Somewhere around 1910, 1912, it transitioned from Norway rats into ground squirrels. So it is endemic in our population here. The last known human transmission of pneumonic plague was in 1924 in downtown Los Angeles. It's just something that always to be aware of. Although we haven't had plague here in a long time, there are plague positives ever so often in our national forests. The last one being in 2014 in our local mountains here. And although it can be treated with antibiotics, you don't want to be the first person in your neighborhood to come down with plague. It also is a real good way that if you think you've been exposed, to clear out if you're trying to be seen for at the hospital. They have a tendency to put you ahead of the line in urgent care. Also, Colorado tick fever and leptospirosis are also vectored by ground squirrels. So again, it's really important that not only is there a issue with ground squirrels in their ability to cause damage to engineered structures, but there is a public health issue associated with them. So it's not a good idea to have large populations of them in areas if we can help it. Certainly in wildland situations, that's where they should be. But in other areas, we really need to kind of do some control work or look to, again, protect folks from the next pandemic. Remember, of course, anytime before you apply any pesticide, that you need to go make sure that there are endangered species or what endangered species may or may not be in the areas. You can always contact your local ag commissioner's office, and certainly DPR has a wonderful website that deals with what is or isn't out there. Like for instance, here in the Antelope Valley, we have the Mojave ground squirrel, which is an endangered species. So we have to be careful when we do work out there that we don't impact this particular animal. So for control options for ground squirrels, there are a number. There's gas cartridges, there's treated baits, there's fumigation and trapping. Habitat modification. Remember that ground squirrels prefer open areas, but will use anything available. So particularly like things you want to eliminate brush piles and debris, destroying vacant burrows after you've gotten control to prevent reinvasion. There are some products out there, burrow blocker being the most recent, that will backfill those stations or those burrows. It's important to modify those habitats where you can. Trapping is practical when populations are in an area are low to moderate, or if it's the only available thing given the situation. Sometimes you just can't use any other method. There are a couple of different methods to use. There's live traps, which are very effective, but they have additional complications. One, and the most important being, you now have a live rodent. You have to euthanize it in some way. Well, you have to euthanize things in a way that are not going to cause undue stress to the animal and are legal. And so you need to have a plan for how you're going to accomplish that before because again, like everything else, you can't relocate these guys someplace else. It's illegal and it's not ethical. There's also kill traps out there, which are a number of types of. There's the conibear. There are box traps and tunnel traps. So these are the types of live traps that you can use. Your typical Avocados or tomahawk type traps. There's also here on the left, it looks like it's called the squirrelinator. There's a couple of other names. What you can do is it's a multiple catch trap. But again, you have to have a method to humanely kill these animals or euthanize these animals because that's the only way that you're going to be able to deal with them otherwise. Other lethal traps, there are the box traps that are sold from a number of different locations. There's the tunnel trap. Conibear 110s will work really well. But if you do use Conibear 110s, there are Fish and Game Code section 404 requires you to be additional labeling and notification so that folks that might come across these that are in areas of publicly owned land might come across these won't be unduly impacted. There are toxic baits out there, diphacinone, chlorphacinone, and zinc phosphide, which zinc phosphide is a restricted material. You can put things in bait stations. They can be used for a continuous supply for the anticoagulant materials. You should always pre-bait. And for anticoagulants, you want to use the 0.005 treated grain is the only thing that's labeled for use in a bait station. We sometimes, it's important sometimes to, I don't particularly like the tea stations because they have a tendency to be, ground squirrels will get in there and will spread bait everywhere, and it's not, I don't particularly like them myself, so we don't use them, and they may be appropriate in certain cropping situations, but they're not ideal. There are other issues with a secondary predator or things that can get into them, non-targets can get into them. So I don't recommend tea stations. Sometimes it's helpful to have them underground in areas where there's a lot of public traffic or what have you. These water meter boxes work really, really well. This is the process that we use to put them down. We create an area so that way it's out of sight, out of mind, and it also provides additional, because these tops are locking. It provides additional protection to keep unwanted folks from getting into these things. Although you have to be careful because other wildlife may also decide that these are a nice place for them to hang out too and look for things. You can also broadcast. And if you do, you have to make sure that the animal, they have a continuous supply of bait. You need to pre-bait first to make sure that they're accepting of grain. This is the 0.01 diphacinone used. You can be broadcast by ATV, but you have to be very careful not to clump it. Remember that although it's counterintuitive, a lot of folks shy away from broadcast baiting. The thing is, if you think about it, it's really probably the safest way to do an application if you're going to use this method. And my thought is that, if you use a bait station, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of bait there. That's a lot of bait in one location. If you're broadcasting, you're putting a very little amount of the material out, and you're using the ground squirrel's biology to want to go out there because, Spermophilus is seed loving in their name. They want to go out there and they want to seek this stuff out. And I've watched them literally pick this bait up and take it back to their burrow and eat it. So it really is putting out much less potential non-target exposure by using broadcast, but that's simply my opinion. You can also put this out by using a belly grinder. Fumigants are very effective when used properly. This photo here is of carbon bisulfide, which is no longer used. One of the problems was it was highly flammable. But it can, like I say, it can be very helpful to use. But you have to remember of the time of year, and again, soil type and the soil moisture makes a huge difference. So you want to make sure that if you are going to use fumigants too, that you need to look at those. Since ground squirrels are an open burrow system, other animals, non-targets, may use these same burrow systems. So it's very, very important that you check ahead of time to make sure that you don't have a burrowing owl or a snake or other non-targets that might be using these same burrow systems. So again, we talked a little bit about aluminum phosphide for pocket gophers. It's another effective method to use for ground squirrels. The other thing that's nice about this material in particular is because it takes out everything. It also takes out any fleas that might be or other ectoparasites that might be on the ground squirrel. So therefore, it's not an issue. If you use, for instance, broadcast toxicants, baits, it's always a good idea to come back through and dust the burrow system with an insecticide to make sure that you aren't leaving any residual fleas that might also have diseases associated with them. With aluminum phosphide, it takes everything out. Remember, you need a restricted materials permit with this stuff. You have to fill out a fumigation management plan. And again, you also need a written recommendation from a PCA and have an on-site pest control, qualified applicator in order to supervise the operations. Again, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide will also be great opportunities to use these here as well. Again, you just have to meter it out and put it out. Carbon monoxide, DPR is putting the final touches on the guidance because remember, in this particular case, carbon monoxide is not the poison. The device is registered as a pest control device, and they are coming up. They had interim instructions on how to use this. They are now formulating, and hopefully later on this spring, early summer, they'll have the final regulations out there as to how this can be used. But again, for all these materials, make sure that you read and understand the label. And if you have any questions whatsoever, and I'll talk about this again, please contact your local agriculture commissioner's office, because we don't want to write violations for folks. We really want these things to be used in their proper method and proper way and an integrated pest control program. So if you have any questions, it's always just like when you fire a gun. Once the bullet's out of the barrel, it's not the time to wonder about what the target is. You need to talk to us first before you make the application. We will go out, we'll even walk the fields with you and give you our opinion and advice, and that way you're covered. Because like I say, we would much rather reach out and help you do your job most effectively, because again, it's not about writing violations. It's about effectively stewarding these products and used in the proper manner, because unfortunately, we have a very few rodent products out there for rodent control. There's very few. So we need to steward the products that we have and make sure that they're most effective to keep this, so that we'll always have the ability to use them. Again, there's the propane exploder, which is also registered for this use. Again, you can see in this one in the farm equipment magazine there in the corner, you can see how much material is expelled from the burrow system, particularly with these open burrow systems. So yeah, there's a real potential to injure the applicator in these. But again, they can be effective when used in the right settings. With ground squirrels, you can use gas cartridges. This is the USDA gas cartridge. Unlike pocket gophers, of course, they smell this stuff. They'll block their system. It's absolutely of no value to use these for pocket gophers. In fact, they're not labeled for that use. But for ground squirrels, because it's an open burrow system, they can be very, very effective. The only thing you need to be cognizant of course, is that you can in really dry areas, you can set, because you're igniting this. It's because this is ammonium nitrate to create the carbon monoxide that kills the animals. You need to be careful to make sure that you're not going to set the rest of the field on fire with them. Also, too, in this example, technically, the burning area should be reversed when you put it into the burrow system, so that way the smoke is going down into the burrow. You also need to make sure that any other burrow entrances are closed, which with the amount of smoke that these things produce, you'll easily see if you didn't catch all the burrows entrances and openings. Shooting, again, can be effective, but again, it's very time consuming, works best against small populations in rural areas. You can use other methods, and this can be used where appropriate, can be used as a cleanup method, where you're down to like 1 or 2 ground squirrels, and they're not going to come to a trap. You can't get them in a trap. You can't, that doesn't make any sense to be out there baiting them. So this may be a way to also finish off the last of the squirrels in your area. Let's talk a little bit about natural predators and biocontrol. So hawks, eagles, rattlesnakes, coyotes, and other predators will take and put a certain amount of biologic pressure on rodent species. In general, biocontrol by in of itself will not keep ground squirrels or other rodents below a level at which they can become pests. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't encourage raptors and things like that, but remember, these things have co-evolved with their prey species, and it's never in a predator's best interest to wipe out its food source. So they're also, predators are territorial. And remember, one reason why we have as many ground squirrels and gophers as we do is because we've modified the land system to have a much greater carrying capacity than would be there naturally, because we favor their ability to colonize and through our own activities. So again, it's not a bad idea to encourage in certain situations where it makes sense, but at the same time, it's generally not an end-all be-all to expect nature and biocontrol systems to completely solve your rodent problem. And again, because we have situations in flood control, engineered flood control structures near, particularly in urban areas where you have engineered structures that can cause flooding and or disease issues, some of our tolerances are almost zero. I mean, not that you're ever going to eradicate these species, but we have to keep them at very, very low levels because of the potential public health concerns that might be there. Other burrowing pests that you can encounter that may be something that you may see out there, or someone may think might be a gopher or ground squirrel. Certainly moles, voles, which are meadow mice, or Norway rats. Most of these animals, although very common, are not frequently seen. Again, these guys are moles, which of course are not rodents. You'll see them out there. One way you distinguish a mole mound from a gopher mound, moles come up and from the very bottom, and they're come up at a 90-degree angle when they put their mole mound up. So you'll see a completely round volcano-shaped. You won't have that crescent-shaped mound. Also, they have a tendency to be very clumpy, and you'll see where the areas where they've lifted the ground up, where they're feeding. Because again, these guys are looking for grubs, for annelids, worms. They're insectivores. They're not looking to eat plant material. So they're going to have feeding tunnels that are just barely below the surface. They are a different issue. And if you try to use gopher issues or control measures on them, you're not going to be successful. Voles, meadow mice, again, they're a nocturnal species. Norway rats, again, they burrow, but again, they are a nocturnal species. In general, you won't see them. But like I say, you will have situations where you may encounter these. So that's why it's important when we do our IPM program, we look at for other secondary features that might tell us what we may be dealing with, or maybe a combination, because a lot of these animals can also be found in the same habitats. Remember, it's really important whenever you do an IPM program that you monitor the area after control is achieved, as again, rodents will readily reinvade the site, or if you haven't achieved your planned goal action. So you need to go out and check to see periodically if you're getting new activity, or as things start to kick in, that you go out there and start doing new work, or whether the work actually worked at all. And then you need to figure out what you need to do in order to, what the next strategy is. And again, it's always easier to control a small population to let something go way, way out of proportion. Just a few things here for the legal aspects from the Fish and Game Code. Again, non-game mammals, which are ground squirrels and gophers, they can be taken at any time when they're found to be injuring crops or other property by the owner or tenant or employees thereof. Also, again, non-game mammals can be taken at any time of the year and any number, including rodents. Again, as long as that method of take is humane. Under the Food and Agriculture Code, boards of supervisors can authorize commissioners to take care of any pests. The government code, the California government code, allows boards of supervisors to control and the destruction of gophers and squirrels found in their jurisdictions. This is just kind of a little additional information as to that might be of interest. So also too, just a real quick word about secondary food containers. As often as I've done talks, not only about these sorts of things, but also laws and regs dealing with pesticide applications and things, it still amazes me that we still have to worry about people putting pesticides in food containers. A few years back, we found a pest control operator was putting aluminum phosphide pellets into a Coors Light aluminum can because the bigger can was obtrusive or what have you. So, it's really, really important that whenever we're talking about pesticides, whenever we're using pesticides, that we don't put them in the containers that aren't what they came in or are not labeled for those uses. If you want to use a secondary container, you need to label it properly. And again, don't ever use a food container. Resources, certainly the UCANR is a great resource for everything. They have their ground squirrels best management practices out there. UC Davis's pest notes. Certainly your local ag commissioner, weights and measures offices, we're here to help you. Certainly the UC extension advisors, the VIPCRAC, the Vertebrate Pest Council is out there to be used, and the proceedings from prior vertebrate pest conferences are also great resources out there. You also have the preeminent field rodent biologist of the state, Dr. Roger Baldwin, out of UC Davis, who has done a lot of all this primary research on methods for gophers and ground squirrels, and he is always happy to talk to and be emailed by folks asking information about this. He's a wonderful resource. And I'm done.
No, you're not. So what's the best time to fumigate ground squirrels? What time of day is the best time?
Well, it doesn't matter really the day. It's actually the time of year, or it's so you want to do it during for when you have high soil moisture, and it's not. And again, you have nice areas where it's not too hot. You can do it during the day and you can do it during a hot day, but it's really more dependent on the soil moisture. And again, it's you want to time it so you get any with ground squirrels, you want to catch it before you got a lot of young ground squirrels out there. With pocket gophers, particularly if it's in an irrigated area, you can do it anytime you like. But the drier the soil or the looser the soil, the less effective that method is going to be.
Okay. So, and strychnine, you say there's no collateral kill using it?
Well, what they would have to do is they would have to dig up the ground squirrel. Dig up the pocket gopher, because strychnine is not registered for use on ground squirrels. For pocket gophers, something would have to get into the burrow system, get up into it, and eat it. So it's possible, but it's very unlikely. We've not ever had very many issues with that here. And but it's theoretically possible, but it is much less likely, again, because it's a closed burrow, because they're going to be dying down in their burrow system, and they're not going to be available. So if someone's dog, I suppose, were to dig down into the burrow and chase after it, it's possible, but like I say, it's just something we just don't see regularly, and it also breaks down relatively quickly.
And when we hear about mountain lions that are being affected by rodenticides, what situation is that occurring in? Is it homeowners killing mice with, or what?
Well, okay, so so it's primarily second generation anticoagulants, which are only registered for use in commensal rodents. So house mice, Norway rats, roof rats. So those are the Brodifacoum, those sorts of things. There are a number of opinions out there as to how this intoxication is happening. One of the problems, unfortunately, is that although those materials are very, very effective for what they're used for, they do have a very, very long half-life. almost close to a year, almost more than a year for some of those products. So that means they remain biologically active in the environment for longer than the animal that ate them is around. So they can be picked up secondarily. Of course, and this is another potential source. You do have folks that solve their do-it-yourself raccoon problems or their neighbor's dogs by illegally putting out rodenticides. You also have marijuana grows that illegally throw out bait, and they've recovered bait. For instance, in Northern California, where they've had issues with other species, I mean, they were hundreds of miles away from homes or other places where you would find commensal rodent control baits being used. Having said that, to be honest with you, we don't know what the pathway was and is for second generation anticoagulants. And so that's one reason why they've been temporarily removed from use for most commercial uses. I mean, there are some exceptions out there where they still can be used for public health safety, things like that. But the majority of uses where they were allowed legally are no longer available because they're reevaluating that. First generation anticoagulants, which what I'm talking about here for ground squirrels and also there's one product for gophers, are multiple feed material. So second gens required one feeding to get a toxic dose, and again had a very long half-life. First generation anticoagulants require have a shorter half-life, 16, 17 days, and you require multiple feedings. In general, they have been associated with the same toxicosis that have been with the second gens, which is one reason why they're still legally available for all of the original uses for which they're used. That doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility for those folks that use them. They have to use them responsibly and make sure that, like all pesticides, that they're used according to their label. And I'm not saying that first gens have not been found in some mountain lions, but it really truly has been the second generation anticoagulants that have been a problem, because again, they are so persistent in the environment. But again, any tools that we use, any pesticide that we use can have a potential to have secondary effects. And that's why it's really important that we steward these materials and use them according to their labels.
Okay, here's a question I'm not sure it's does platinum tape attached to a stake work as a squirrel deterrent? Have you heard that one? Platinum tape attached to a stake.
No, I haven't. Although for what the cost of platinum is these days, I mean, that'd be a pretty high-end use. No, I've not heard of that. I've not seen any research done on that, but it's possible. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question. What do you do with you have a live trap, you've got a gopher, you've got a squirrel, ground squirrel. What do you do with it? How do you kill it legally without traumatizing it?
Well, yeah. So here's the thing: if you've got anytime you have a live rodent, there's a couple of methods you can use. Generally, the best and safest way is to use carbon dioxide and either put it in a chamber or put it in a bag, and that's considered to be a humane way to dispatch the animal.
Okay. Okay.
Once again, I would like to thank Jim Hartman and Rebecca Barboza for their time. Thank you so much. And we look forward to maybe having you guys speak again in the near future. Thank you.